and others to focus their attention on the midterm elections, including John Casey's re-election race. Can you give us a little preview of the issues relevant to Ohio voters you think will be in play, and what factors, if any, from Obama's win yesterday you think will be durable enough to carry forward to you?
Well, I think as we've come to know, budgets reflect one's priorities. In the case of John Kasich, stripping away billions of dollars from public education, for instance, has its impact on the local community. I think the way that John Kasich continues to govern as a leader of the state of Ohio is divisive, it's corrosive, and I think that has an impact on the electorate. The most recent polling indicates that John Kasich still underperforms Republicans. He is at 45 in terms of approval in the latest PPP poll, and against a generic Democrat without a name attached, Democrats are just 1 point behind, 44-43. This is a huge opportunity for us going into this next budget cycle to continue to define John Kasich for who he is. He is a champion for giveaways to corporate Ohio and corporate America, with little in the way of convincing through transparency Ohioans that these kinds of investments work. He stood against the auto rescue. He stood with Mitt Romney and others who suggested that women should not have the right to control their own reproductive health care choices. He is opposed to Obamacare and believes that pre-existing conditions should continue to keep people from adequate health care. It's the kinds of issues that define Mitt Romney will continue to define John Kasich. Next question here, and then I'll go back to the phone after a question here. Next question here.
Early voting issues.
Mark?
There's been a lot of debate over early voting and no weekends, whether they have weekends. What's the Democratic Party going to do on that issue moving forward?
The question about early voting, the Democratic Party's response to the early voting cycle this year, and if there's going to be any effort to strengthen the calendar, perhaps change it, or to fight against those changes. Fair, Mark? I had a conversation with John Husted 2 nights ago where I indicated to John that I was eager to work with him to secure those 35 days of early vote and to establish additional weekend voting hours. No one likes to see long lines. And I don't believe John Husted likes to see long lines because it affects his legacy as Secretary of State. I believe that there is an opportunity here to craft meaningful legislation that would continue the early vote opportunities for voters and to expand into additional weekends. I think John speaks to uniformity first and foremost. I disagree with that, but I will cede the argument because I think allowing every voter the chance to vote on weekends is appropriate. 144 Ottawa Countyans in my own district voted that last weekend in 3 days. Okay. Well, tens of thousands vote in Cuyahoga County and other places during weekends. So I think that if we give those folks an opportunity to vote on weekends, more people will vote. We all want that. I think John Husted wants that. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mentioned this last night. Tom Niehaus is the president of the Senate and has been quoted as saying that during the lame duck session between now and Christmas that he may take up early vote and, in his words, reform it. The Ohio Democratic Party is prepared to take to referendum any legislation that impacts the early vote weekend without our support. We will do that. We are well prepared to do that. The Ohio Democratic Party, Friends of Sherrod Brown, the coordinated campaign remains intact, and there's no one leaving, and frankly, we're looking for things to do. So I urge President Niehaus to not tamper with the early vote weekend.
Chris, who's running for governor?
I'm not going to get Steve.
As we're looking at county returns here, actually, although President Obama won, his margins went down compared to 2008. Republican margins, the number of Republicans actually went up, just not strong enough to overcome the urban county advantage that the Democrats have. In fact, the Democratic margin went down, contrary to what you said in Ottawa and what you return. So I'm wondering how you can be sure that the auto ballot message really resonated. I'm also wondering whether you have a concern about urban versus rural at this point
Well, thanks for the question, Steve. I think everybody heard it. With all due regard, and I appreciate it, what matters most is who gets to 51. And the Ohio Democratic Party is very pleased that the president was reelected last night, as was Sherrod Brown. As I mentioned, I believe the second Democrat to be reelected with more than 50% of the vote in the last 75 years. I think that in an incumbent reelection, you're always going to have some erosion of the vote. It happens more often than not. But in the case of the Ascendant Coalition of the 2008 cycle, it remains largely intact. And I frankly believe we drew more Reagan Democrats back to the party and back to Senator Brown in President Obama's fold in the state of Ohio. I think the numbers reflect that. Sure, would I like to see larger numbers in some counties, if not all counties? Absolutely. But as a pragmatist and somebody who's in the business of counting votes, I'm very, very pleased with where we are, and also with where we are going as a party, and for the president during his second term, and of course for Senator Brown in his second term as well. But more work's to be done. Laura had a question here.
Who's running for governor?
Question. Laura asked, "Who's running for governor of Ohio?"
Yeah.
I've not spoken to anybody who's willing to announce quite yet, but we will have many people interested in running statewide, whether for governor or for Secretary of State, Treasurer, Auditor, Attorney General. There's such opportunity in this state running statewide, and we're looking forward to it. As I remind many people here often, John Kasich received a plurality of the vote, not a majority, and the closest incumbent loss in the country was here in Ohio. John Kasich, during what was described as the best Republican cycle in generations, could only muster 49% of the vote in this overwhelming Republican year. 49% of the vote. He's a weakened candidate, and over the course of the next 2 years, will continue to define his role as leader of the state, his opposition to the auto rescue, his opposition to Obamacare, his opposition to the kinds of things that middle-income families have come to support with President Obama and Senator Brown. Question for the phone. Joe.
Joe Vienna, the Plain Dealer.
Yeah, Joe.
Hi. On the U.S. Senate race, what do the results say about the campaign Mandel ran, and how do you assess his future?
Well, I'm obviously not going to say many kind words about Josh after the campaign he ran. I think his legacy is already shaped. He's the fellow who allowed ads to be run 2 years ago comparing Kevin Boyce, the incumbent state treasurer, to a Muslim. I think he will be long remembered as the candidate who chose to accept $40 million in special interest money and wallow in the mud. And he's 6 months away from appearing on Fox News as a regular analyst. He will join the likes of Ken Blackwell and others who will slip away into the past, and we'll recognize him from time to time as that fellow who follows Sarah Palin. Other questions on the phone? No? Anybody?
Can I clarify? You're going to be pushing another redistricting reform package next year for the ballot?
I'm prepared at this point to say that is a project that we will explore, and I have little doubt that if the opportunity presents itself to put a package together, a referendum together, constitutional amendment, we will do so.
But is this
2013 cycle? Is
this something you're doing on your own, or is this something that you might work with Republicans in the State House to create a package?
It would be an effort that we would first want to work with Republicans to achieve, and that's why I was heartened by my conversation with Secretary Husted about early vote and the additional conversations I've had with others during the course of the last few weeks.
Could that be done through the Constitutional Modernization Commission?
It could. I don't want to close the door on any opportunity, and I have to take the Secretary and others at their word. And others have mentioned to me willingness to discuss this, and from time to time you even hear Bob Bennett, the chairman of the Republican Party, mention the same. We have only a couple of ground rules. It must be implemented in the next cycle, and it must include competitiveness.
You said a couple times that Barack Obama was the second Democrat elected with more than 50% of the vote in the last 75 years. Is that just in Ohio? Or
Just in Ohio.
who was the last?
You know, I'm of the belief that it
Who was
was,
the last one?
I'm of the belief that it was Franklin Roosevelt, but I stand corrected if somebody can. I read that this morning. That's why I keep saying I believe.